Family, friends, Fidelity. I'm pleased to wish that you had a wonderful Passover, and you, like myself, have qualified in the eyes of the Most High to be here a few more days. Let's go before the Lord. Father, we just bless you and we honor you. And we love you, and we do desire, Father, to live our lives that will bring a smile as if it were to your face. Father, we do need you every hour, and we do hunger and thirst after your truth and your righteousness. We desire to be great ambassadors for you here on the earth. And we do desire to follow you the balance of our days. In your majestic name we pray, and all that can agree say amen. We'll be going back to 2 Samuel chapter 9, and we'll look at the entire chapter, and we'll go verse by verse, and I'll start out in the King James Version, but I want to set the stage, so to speak. In dealing with family, friends, and fidelity, it's pertinent that we treat each other respectfully, and we treat each other in such a way that we identify and elevate who it is we serve by the way we treat one another and by the consistency in how we live and treat one another. You see, in times like this where everybody is being affected, it's been difficult, and we're being forced to reacquaint ourselves with family. We're being forced to look at some choices and decisions and selections that we've made. And it's given us an opportunity to not only review how we have served the Most High, but it's given us an opportunity in these last few days to really examine our heart and to even question, why are we doing what we're doing? Some of us have finished last week through tradition, and I'm not going to speak on that one way or another, but many of us did relive the Passover story. And there was a coming out after the Passover. They were about to start their journey. The Exodus was about to happen. And in a few days to maybe a few months, there'll be another sort of exodus, so to speak. And for some, people will characterize it as things returning to normal. Others have other ways they want to characterize it. I would like to share with you that there's only one entity that really knows what's going to happen. There's only one entity that knows how it's going to transpire. Now, there are a lot of people, and I bless the Most High for the internet, and there's a lot of valuable, good information. It's opened up avenues for a lot of voices to be heard, and there are a lot of people that have a heart for people. They're not pushing an agenda. They're not promoting even their way of faith. But there are others also that do have an agenda. And they're promoting their message loud and clear. I would suggest to you and prayerfully say to you, stay with his teachings and instructions. Pattern your life after the things that you have read and studied. Stay close to him. A lot of the preachers will tell you, stay close to God. Yes, stay close, stay real close to him. And make your decisions as if your very life depended on it. Don't get caught up into charisma. Don't get caught up into I want to be polite. Don't get caught up into tactics. We have to be very, very, very careful these days as to who we give an ear to. Men that are married and have families, you really have to be on point. Your household is looking to you for direction as you look for direction from the Most High. Let's get into the scriptures. First out of the King James translation, and it says, "And David said, is there yet any that is left of the house of Saul, that I may show him kindness for Jonathan's sake?" And most of us know in David and Jonathan had something more than what I would call a friendship. They actually had almost like a kinship. Now, Jonathan was the son of a king. And at the time he was coming up, a lot of people thought that the ladder of succession would go, well, if your dad is the king, when he leaves, you'll be king. Jonathan didn't necessarily prescribe to that. He and David had a very, very special relationship, but Jonathan did love his father. He loved his father. But as many of you know that have read the story of Jonathan and David, a lot of things transpired where Jonathan had to make a decision about his relationship with David, his relationship with his father, and his relationship with who he was as a man. Jonathan's life and David's life, they had a lot of similarities in their life. Jonathan was a man of war, so he fought some battles. He had some victories. And people thought very highly of him in his day. Well, we all know the story of David. God paid him an ultimate compliment. A man after my own heart. Now that's high praise. Well, they made, some would say a promise, some would say an oath, some would say they formed an alliance. And they pledged to one another to look after, because I love you so much as a brother. I don't want to get the word love out of context. The godly kind of love they had for one another, that they would have given their lives for one another. And Jonathan passed on, and David went on, of course, to be king, and all was good. And we know David had some missteps, as all of us have, and some of us will continue. But David stayed with God. And even in this time of uncertainty and all of us searching for answers, and many of us have wonders about things, and many of us want to know where we fit in all of this. And the one that can answer, he's there, and he will answer when he's ready. But let me get on with this. And David said, is there yet any that is left of the house of Saul, that I may show him kindness for Jonathan's sake? Because, you know, Saul, who was the king at that time, in the beginning he liked David. And we know how David took care of Goliath because of all the men that Saul had in his army. They were afraid of Goliath, and I'm not saying that making a disparaging remark. Goliath was a formidable foe. But as in life even today, sometimes the more successful you are when you're doing things in the name of the Most High, even among other believers, sometimes jealousy has a way of rearing its ugly head. And most people that follow the scriptures, they're all familiar with this, and a lot of believers love to say, there's nothing new under the sun. And so a lot of things that were happening in the first century, some of them are still happening now. But they made a pact together, and they stuck with it. They stuck with it. And the way that you know that they stuck with it is because sometime after his passing, David, as king, and you know, at that time, if you were king, it didn't get any better than that. And so for a lot of us, before this virus, you know, you might not have been king, but you were living good, eating good, driving good. Some of you got more than one residence, you know, summer homes, traveling. And I'm not knocking any of that. But life was good. And I pose a question to you because, remember, the theme is family, friends, fidelity. Who in your life have you become closer to, even closer maybe than a brother? Where you can look another individual in the eye, and when you say, I love you with the love of the Lord, not only mean it, but mean it to such a degree that I will do whatever I can for you. I gave an illustration in some teachings past where I was talking about the seriousness of becoming a godfather or a godmother. You know, in our Western culture, it got to be something that was, and again, I'm not trying to be disparaging, but it was something nice to do. If someone asked you, you would say, well, yeah, sure. And it was more of a ceremony. Why? Because you got to come before the congregation. The preacher, with his or her Bible in their hand, would say some words, and you got a new outfit, and you're standing there. The parents are dressed, you're dressed, and everybody's saying, hey, what a great couple that's willing to be the godfather and godmother of this child. But what was behind that? See, that was something those people that asked you to do that, they were serious about it. Those that really understood what they were asking you to do. Because, see, really what you were signing up for, it was a whole lot more than just standing before maybe a crowded assembly of believers with a nice new fresh suit, nice haircut, got your hair done, nails did, and all of that. It was more to it than that. You were saying that should something happen to you, I'm going to see to it that Johnny and Susie have proper upbringing. And if you're a believer, you were saying, and that they will continue to follow the teachings and instructions of God as I follow them. That's really what you were saying. So that's really what David was. David was still carrying on. See, he never forgot what he and Jonathan almost swore to each other. And I will say, I'll say, I believe they swore an oath to one another. And you know, do we have those kind of friendships today? I'm just asking. And again, I'm not slinging arrows at anybody. He said, show him kindness for Jonathan's sake. And there was of the house of Saul a servant whose name was Ziba. And when they had called him unto David the king, he said unto him, art thou Ziba? And he said, thy servant is he. And the king said, is there not yet any of the house of Saul, the same Saul that tried to kill him, that I may show the kindness of God unto him? And Ziba said unto the king, Jonathan hath yet a son which is lame on his feet. And the king said unto him, where is he? And Ziba said unto the king, behold, he is in the house of Machir, the son of Ammiel, in Lodibar. And I heard a pastor teach about Lodibar some years ago, and he really did a play on Lodibar, meaning that it was a pretty poor city, and things weren't very prosperous in that city. And that's where the son of Jonathan was living, and he was a cripple. And many of you know his name was Mephibosheth. Let me read this to you out of another translation, because it speaks more like we do today. David inquired, is there anyone still alive from the family of Saul, to whom, for Jonathan's sake, I can show kindness? In Shaul's household, there had been a servant named Ziba, and he summoned him to David. The king asked him, are you Ziba? And he answered, at your service. The king said, is there anyone still alive from the family of Shaul, to whom I can show God's grace? Ziba said to him, Ziba said to the king, there is still Jonathan's son, that's Jonathan's son, with the lame legs. The king said to him, where is he? And Ziba answered, he's in the house of Machir, the son of Ammiel, in Lo-debar. King David sent and took him from the house of Machir, the son of Ammiel, in Lo-debar. Mephibosheth, the son of Jonathan, the son of Shaul, came to David, fell on his face, and prostrated himself. He didn't come in like some of us may have come in. Yeah, I'm Jonathan's son. And you know, I heard from the rest of our family, King David, you know, you owe me. Because from what I heard, you and Jonathan, y'all were tight. All those years, Mephibosheth, he lived in Lo-debar. Maybe he knew of the relationship that they had, maybe he didn't. But he did not try to trade upon the relationship that the king had with his own father. And I'm laying it out the way that I'm laying it out because, folks, this situation that we're all having to deal with, it's not only a test for the different nations, not only a test for the different houses of faith, this is a test for each one of us to display who we really are and who we really serve. David said to Mephibosheth, and he answered, here is your servant. David said to him, don't be afraid, for I am determined to be kind to you for the sake of Jonathan, your father. I will restore to you all the land of Saul, your grandfather, and you will always eat at my table. Now that's the king talking. Now that's a person that was in great authority, that did not forget a covenant, if you want to use that he made with a friend. They were not blood related. That's a real friend. You will always eat at my table. Listen at the response. He, Mephibosheth, prostrated himself and said, listen at this, what is your servant that makes you pay such attention to a dead dog like me? The king said to Ziba, the king called to Ziba, Saul's servant. And of course, in this translation, they're using the Hebraic terms, but I'm going to stay with Saul and Jonathan because that's something that most of us are familiar with, those names. But Shaul, Jonathan, that's Jonathan. But I don't want you to lose sight of what's happening here. This is among friendship. And that's a term that we use a lot, particularly in this country. I've given the example, and I'm technology challenged, so to speak. So, I did, and a lot of times the congregation, when they were together, they all agreed. You may have 1,000 likes, and you can befriend 500,000 people, but they're really not your friends. You don't have that kind of relationship that Jonathan and David had. That's a real friendship. The king called to Ziba, Saul's servant, and said to him, I have given everything Saul and his family own to your master's grandson. You are to, listen, these are the orders that King David is given to King Saul's servant, who was still operating as if he were the servant to Saul. I have given everything Saul and his family owned to your master's grandson. You are to work the land for him, your sons and your slaves. So the servant had slaves also. So he had a little bit of authority. He had a little bit of wealth. He was living very well also. But now he's getting new marching orders. You are to work the land for him, you, your sons, and your slaves. Harvest the crops so that your master's grandson will have food to feed his family. But Mephibosheth, your master's grandson, will always eat at my table. Staying true to the covenant that he had with Mephibosheth's father. Most of us, person passed, that's it. Hey, hey. And some people, upon your passing, if they owed you some money, you know what they would do? They'll write you a check and put it in the casket with you. Who's going to cash the check? Friendship is serious, real friendship. You see, in times like this is also when we're finding out how many real friends we got. Ziba the servant, he had 15 sons. 15 sons. 15. Now they just said sons. I'm sure he probably had some daughters too. He was busy. Ziba had 15 sons and 20 slaves. So automatically, Mephibosheth, out of Lodibar, who had a family, now he got 15 sons and a chief servant, 20 slaves, basically at his disposal. Life suddenly got real good for him. And he had the declaration that from here on out, man, for the balance of my days, I'm going to eat at the king's table. Now, his existence in Lo-debar was nowhere near what he was getting ready to walk into. And so right now, with everything shut down, and we really can't get too close to one another right now, and from what I understand, for the next 3 weeks, they're wanting to for us to follow the rules even more close, because they're trying to, as they say, flatten the curve in Virginia. Saints, by the time this thing lifts, you're going to want to hug somebody. I mean, and this time, maybe the hugs will be real, not that plastic stuff that we had become accustomed to doing. Now when we say, when the sign's all clear, it's going to be a happy time. For some of us, it's going to be a real happy time to just get out of the house and get a break, only to really realize after you've had a chance to get back out and do some mingling, you know, home is good. And see, a lot of us are finding out home is good. And I know, you know, we deal with bouts of cabin fever. I had a situation where I got to talk to a buddy of mine Thursday, and he had gotten so frustrated that he was willing to pay for the person that was living in his residence. He was like, look, pick a hotel, stay there for a couple of weeks, on me, just go. You know, see, you know, I'm laughing about it now, and it ended well. Let me say that. Let me say that. But people are getting frustrated. And they're frustrated because they don't know what to do. And sometimes when we don't know what to do, we kind of lash out. And you lash out with who's around. And since we've all been advised to stay in your house, only go out if you absolutely need something, and only if you are essential personnel should you be out. And now you have to have a letter of exemption that you keep in your car, and it basically says that you know you have a right to be out. I have one of those. In fact, just yesterday I was spraying a rock quarry so that they could continue. And of course, they had signs up. They're practicing social distancing and things of that nature. But they wanted to see, hey, you have that? Yes, I have the letter of authority. I've got my badge, and I'm wearing the shirt and everything else. Until this thing runs its course, we're going to find out what we really mean to people. And we're also going to learn about ourselves, how much we care about people. And if you can stay true to the teachings and instructions, because that's what we got to fall back on when we get frustrated, when we feel like we got cabin fever, when we're like, man, you know, even the information that's being given out by the myriad of networks, sometimes you just want to turn it off, and you should. You need to get away from it for a while. And just regroup. How do you regroup? Get back in the Word. You know, just get back in the Word. The clouds will lift. I don't know when, and I'm not going to pass myself off as a prognosticator. They'll lift when He say lift. But in the meantime, we all have to occupy. And it's better to occupy His way than the way we've been occupying. Let me get back to this. This is what Ziva said to the king. He said, "Your servant will do everything my lord the king commands his servant, although Mephibosheth has been eating at my table as one of the king's descendants." So now what I want to show you here is while Ziva didn't have a covenant with Saul like Jonathan had with David, but he stayed true to his position in life. See, Ziva stayed true in service to Saul by feeding Jonathan's son. So even if what I'm trying to get you to see is, even if you don't have a friendship like David and Jonathan had, do you have people in your life that are going to stay true to their station in life, particularly those that are following the teachings and instructions of the Most High? Because in doing that, you know that they will do good when it's within their power to do so, because that's what's being taught in His teachings and instructions. What I'm trying to convey to you is believers are worth having, particularly in times like this. And you know, I've read this time and time again, but until recently did I see that, well, while Ziva, a servant, didn't have a covenant with the king, he stayed true to it. How many of us are doing that in our lives? I'm just asking. Again, I'm not accusing. I'm not pointing fingers, because I learned a long time ago, for every time I point a finger at somebody, 3 pointing back at me. I'm tired of fingers being pointed back at me, so I stop pointing. He let David know. He says, "Your servant will do everything my lord the king commands his servant, although," in other words, but however, king, I just want you to know, he's been eating at my table as one of the king's descendants. Mephibosheth had a young son whose name was Micah. Everyone living in Ziva's house was a servant of Mephibosheth. But Mephibosheth lived in Jerusalem. He always ate at the king's table, and he was lame in both legs. In other words, here was a person that wasn't living as, you know, many of the old folks used to say, wasn't living high on the hog. I'm sure he had some type of existence because he was a son of Jonathan. And Jonathan had some means. And of course, Saul, of course, was king until he got demoted. So he had wealth, but it wasn't what he walked into. And right now, all of our wealth has been touched in some way, whether we realize it or not. And I know, a lot of people will say, well, what I have is, really not that important. But times like this, now everybody's taking stock of what we own. How would you feel if you went home because you were ordered to go home and another family's living in your home and said, Barry, we're commandeering your house because we don't have anywhere to stay? Everything that he has blessed you with, be a good steward of it. Appreciate what he has allowed you to acquire. But remember this, with every acquisition, it's going to require something of you. You don't just get stuff to just have stuff. Have a desire to bless someone else. Have a desire that everyone will see this thing through. Have a desire to, if you can't be a friend like David and Jonathan, and we can't be that with everybody, but we can be like Ziva. God bless you.